She was fired at the cafe on Christmas Eve. Then a single dad at the corner table stood up and did the unthinkable. Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Claire Bennett was 9 hours into her double shift at Riverside Cafe on Christmas Eve, running on exactly 3 hours of sleep and coffee that tasted like burnt regret. And she was about 30 seconds from either crying in the walk-in freezer or screaming into a stack of napkins, but she couldn't do either because Table 6 needed refills and Table 12 wanted their check. And the family at Table 4 had a 3-year-old who just spilled an entire hot chocolate across the booth. Her feet were killing her in the cheap non-slip shoes she'd bought at Walmart. Her lower back felt like someone was driving a nail through her spine, and she had exactly $340 in her checking account, with rent due in 2 days for $1,200, which meant she was $860 short of not getting evicted. Here's the thing about raising your 16-year-old twin siblings on a waitress salary after your parents die in a car accident. Every single day is a calculation of what you can afford to lose. And right now, Claire was calculating that if tips stayed decent through closing, she might scrape together another $100, which still left her $700 short. But maybe she could beg the landlord for an extension. She was refilling coffee for a regular named Tom, who always tipped 20% when she caught sight of the corner table. The single dad with the identical twin girls who came in every Saturday like clockwork. And today the little girls were wearing matching red dresses and the dad was reading them a picture book while they drank hot chocolate. Claire had been sneaking them extra whipped cream for months because they reminded her of Jordan and Sophie back when her siblings were little, and the world still made sense. And she'd drawn them snowmen and reindeer on napkins whenever she had 30 seconds to breathe. The dad always smiled at her with these warm green eyes that made her stomach do weird flips she absolutely did not have time for. And she'd caught him watching her more than once with an expression she couldn't quite read. His name was Nathan something. She'd heard his daughters call him Daddy Nate, and he owned the bookshop across the street that always looked cozy and perfect through the windows. 2:30 in the afternoon hit, and the cafe was still packed with last-minute holiday people when Patricia Morrison walked in, wearing a coat that probably cost more than Claire's rent, and sat down at table 9 with the attitude of someone who'd never been told no in her entire life. Claire brought water and menus with her best customer's service smile, even though her face hurt from smiling for 9 straight hours. And Patricia immediately started complaining that the table was wobbly and the music was too loud. And did they have any specials that weren't listed because she had very specific dietary needs. 45 minutes later, Claire brought Patricia's third coffee refill, and the woman took one sip and her face twisted like she just tasted poison. "This coffee is cold. This is completely unacceptable. Where is your manager?" Patricia's voice carried across the entire cafe, and Claire felt every eye turn toward her table, felt her face start to burn with that specific embarrassment that comes from being yelled at in public. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Let me get you a fresh cup right away. I've been covering extra tables today, so things are running a bit slow." And Claire reached for the cup, but Patricia pulled it away. "I don't want excuses. I'm a regular customer here, and this is disrespectful. Your service has been slow and inadequate since I sat down. I want to speak to Derek immediately." Claire's boss, Derek, emerged from the back office where he'd been on his phone for the last 3 hours doing absolutely nothing while she ran herself into the ground. And Patricia launched into a complaint that made Claire sound like she'd personally ruined Christmas. "Your waitress has been rude and slow. My coffee's been cold twice. She's ignoring my table. This is the worst service I've ever experienced, and I expect something to be done about it." Derek didn't even look at Claire, didn't ask for her side, just said, "Mrs. Morrison, I sincerely apologize. This is completely unacceptable. Claire, back office now." The walk from table 9 to the back office felt like a death march with every customer watching, and Claire's hands started shaking before she even got through the door. "Derek, I've been here 2 years. I've never had a complaint. I'm covering Jenna's tables because she called out again. One customer having a bad day doesn't mean." But Derek cut her off with a hand up and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "This isn't working out, Claire. You're fired, effective immediately. Clean out your locker and leave." The words hit her like a physical blow, and she actually stumbled backward. "What? No, Derek, please. It's Christmas Eve. I have rent due in 2 days. I have my brother and sister depending on me. I need this job. Derek's face stayed cold and blank. You should have thought about that before giving terrible service to a valued customer. I need you off the premises in 5 minutes, or I'm calling security. Claire felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall in front of this man. Can I at least finish my shift? I need today's tips, please. And her voice cracked on the last word, which made her hate herself. No, leave now. I'll mail your final check. And Derek was already turning away like she'd stopped mattering the second he said the words. And Claire walked back through the cafe, knowing everyone was staring and knowing she looked like exactly what she was, desperate and broken and out of options. She grabbed her coat from behind the counter with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, and the little girl from the corner table, one of Nathan's twins, looked up at her with big concerned eyes. Why are you sad, cookie lady? And Claire had to turn away before the kids saw her cry. She was halfway to the door doing math in her heads that didn't work no matter how she calculated it. 340 minus whatever she'd spent on Jordan and Sophie's small Christmas gifts left maybe 200. She was 1,000 short on rent, and now she had no job and no way to fix this when she heard a chair scrape loud against the floor. Nathan Hayes stood up from his corner table so fast his coffee almost spilled, and his twin daughters both looked up startled. And he said something to the woman who just walked in before heading straight toward Derek, who was smugly walking back to his office. Excuse me, you just fired the best employee you have? And Nathan's voice carried across the whole cafe, making everyone go quiet. And Derek turned around looking annoyed. This is none of your business, sir. This is a personnel matter. But Nathan wasn't backing down. His jaw set in a way that said he'd already made up his mind about something. Actually, it is my business, Claire, right? And he looked at her, still standing by the door, frozen in shock. I own Once Upon a Page across the street, the bookshop and cafe. I've been looking for a manager for months, and I just watched you handle a rush by yourself while staying kind to every single customer, including my daughters. He turned back to address the whole cafe, voice clear and firm. You're hired if you want the job. Starting tomorrow, double whatever he's paying you, full benefits, and Christmas Day off with your family. The entire cafe went dead silent, and Claire just stared at this man she barely knew, who was offering her a lifeline she absolutely did not deserve. You're offering me a job right now? You don't even know if I'm qualified. And her voice came out shaky and small, and Nathan smiled at her like she'd just said something ridiculous. I've watched you for 6 months. You remember every regular's order. You're patient with kids. You just managed this whole place during Christmas rush by yourself. You're more than qualified. Do you want it or not? Claire looked at Derek's red face, looked at Patricia, who suddenly looked uncomfortable, looked at Nathan's twin daughters waving at her from the corner table with whipped cream on their faces, and heard herself say, yes, yes, I want it. Thank you. And the whole cafe erupted in applause. Derek sputtered, You can't just poach my employees. And Nathan's smile went sharp. You fired her. She's not your employee anymore. She's mine. He walked Claire back to his table and sat her down like she might fall over, which honestly she might, and his daughters immediately started chattering. You're going to work with Daddy? That's so cool. Can you draw us more pictures? Nathan introduced himself properly. I'm Nathan Hayes. Everyone calls me Nate. These are my daughters Ava and Mia. And his handshake was warm and steady, and Claire felt like she'd just stepped into an alternate universe where Christmas miracles were real. His sister appeared from nowhere. I'm Vanessa, and that was the most dramatic hiring I've ever seen. Welcome to the chaos. Claire started crying then, couldn't help it, the relief and shock and gratitude just pouring out. And little Ava handed her a napkin. Don't be sad, my daddy gives really good jobs. They talked for 20 minutes, Nate explaining the bookshop needed help desperately, Claire admitting she dropped out of college one semester, short of a business degree, when her parents died 3 years ago. I'm raising my younger siblings, twins actually, Jordan and Sophie. They're 16, and Nate's whole face softened. Twins seem to run in both our families. Mine are 3. Their mom died the day they were born. The weight of that hung between them, 2 people who'd lost everything trying to build something new. And when Claire finally stood to leave, she looked back at him, still sitting with his daughters, and felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope that maybe things were actually going to be okay. Claire woke up Christmas morning in her tiny apartment with Jordan and Sophie already awake making pancakes that smelled slightly burned, and the second she walked into the kitchen, her siblings bombarded her with questions about yesterday's insane job offer from a complete stranger. Wait, so the hot chocolate dad with the cute twin girls just hired you on the spot in front of everyone? Sophie was practically bouncing, and Jordan looked suspicious in that protective big brother way, even though Claire was technically older by 11 years. Is this safe? You don't actually know this guy. He could be a total creep. And Claire sat down hard at their thrift store table, feeling exhaustion catch up with her. He's been a regular for 6 months. His daughters are sweet, and I need this job or we're getting evicted in 2 days, so yeah, I'm taking it. And her voice came out sharper than she meant it to. They opened their small presents, things Claire had bought on clearance and wrapped in newspaper because wrapping paper felt like a waste of money. And Sophie hugged her so tight Claire couldn't breathe. You're the best, you know that. Mom and Dad would be so proud of how you take care of us. And Claire had to excuse herself to the bathroom before her siblings saw her cry because she absolutely did not feel like the best. She felt like she was drowning and barely keeping all three of them afloat. December 26th hit cold and bright, and Claire showed up at Once Upon a Page at 9 in the morning with Jordan and Sophie trailing behind because they'd insisted on coming to check out her new boss, which really meant make sure he wasn't a serial killer. The bookshop was gorgeous, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling shelves, and the smell of old paper and coffee. But within 30 seconds, Claire's business brain started screaming because books were piled everywhere, with no clear organization. The cafe section had 3 tables when the space could fit 8, and the whole place felt like beautiful chaos that was definitely losing money. Nate was already there with Ava and Mia, who immediately recognized Claire and started jumping up and down. "Cookie lady, you came. Are you going to work here forever?" And Claire knelt down to their level. "I'm going to try. You think you can help me?" The twins met the twins, and it was awkward at first. 16-year-olds trying to talk to 3-year-olds, until Ava handed Jordan a picture book about dinosaurs, and suddenly all 4 kids were sitting on the floor reading. Nate showed Claire to the back office, and her stomach dropped straight through the floor when she saw the state of his records. Bills stacked everywhere, invoices mixed with personal mail, receipts shoved in drawers. Absolute financial disaster. She spent 3 hours going through everything while Nate made coffee and avoided eye contact. And when she finally came out of the office, her face must have said it all because he just slumped against the counter. "It's bad, isn't it? You're going to quit on day 1. And his voice was so defeated Claire felt something crack in her chest. "You're 40,000 in debt. You're 2 months behind on rent. Sales are down 60% from last year. Nate, you're going to lose this place in like 2 months if something doesn't change drastically." He told her everything then, voice breaking in places, how he'd opened the bookshop with his wife Rachel's life insurance money because she'd always dreamed of owning one, how she'd died during an emergency C-section and the girls survived but Rachel didn't, how he'd quit his corporate lawyer job and poured everything into this place thinking it would help him grieve, but he had no idea how to actually run a business. "I'm failing her again. She trusted me with her dream, and I'm destroying it." And Claire grabbed his hands without thinking. "You're not failing. You just need systems and help. And that's literally why you hired me, so let me help." Over the next 3 weeks, Claire completely transformed Once Upon a Page, reorganizing inventory by genre and creating actual displays, implementing Storytime Saturdays that brought families in for coffee and pastries, partnering with local schools for book fairs, setting up a social media presence that Nate didn't even know existed. Revenue started climbing slowly, and Nate watched her work like she was performing actual magic. And somewhere between fixing his disaster of a filing system and teaching him how to use spreadsheets, he realized he was completely in love with her. Early January, Margaret Chen showed up unannounced, Rachel's mother and the twins' grandmother, and the second she saw Claire behind the counter, her whole face went cold. "So you're the new manager? How convenient for you, swooping in on a widower." And her voice dripped with accusation that made Claire's face burn. Nate tried to intervene, but Margaret wasn't done. "My daughter built this dream with him. I won't stand by and watch some opportunist take advantage of his grief and confuse my granddaughters. Claire excused herself to the bathroom and cried for 10 minutes before pulling herself together. And when she came out, she heard Nate and Margaret arguing in the office. She started keeping her distance after that, staying purely professional, stopped drawing pictures for Ava and Mia, who kept asking why Miss Claire didn't play with them anymore. And Nate noticed immediately. What happened? Did I do something wrong? And Claire shook her head. Your mother-in-law's right. I'm here to work, not complicate your life. You have daughters and a dead wife's memory, and I have siblings to raise. This is too messy. Nate stepped closer, voice dropping. What is this, Claire? What are we avoiding talking about? And she couldn't look at him. Something that can't happen. 2 weeks later, her old boss, Derek, started spreading rumors around town that Claire had slept her way into her new job. And Jordan came home from school absolutely furious, having heard it from friends whose parents ate at Riverside Café. Are you dating your boss? Because everyone's saying you seduced him to get hired? And Claire wanted to scream, no, God, no, he's my employer, that's it. People are just cruel. Sophie watched her sister's face carefully. Would it be so bad if you were? He seems really nice and you smile when you talk about him. Everything came to a head when a major pipe burst in the bookshop, causing $8,000 in water damage. And Nate just sat on the floor, surrounded by ruined books, ready to give up completely. This is a sign. I should close it. I'm drowning and dragging you down with me. But Claire refused to let him quit. She organized a community fundraiser called Save Our Story, got Jordan and Sophie to run social media, convinced Ava and Mia to do a lemonade stand even though it was January and adorable, but completely ineffective. And the town rallied, raising $6,000 in one weekend. After the fundraiser, Nate found Claire alone in the office with all 4 kids asleep in the reading nook, and he just looked at her for a long minute before speaking. Why are you doing this? You could have left when things got hard, when my mother-in-law was awful, when the rumors started. Why stay? Claire kept her eyes on the laptop. Because you gave me a chance when I had nothing. Because this place matters. Because your daughters deserve to grow up with their mom's dream alive. And her voice broke on the last word. Nate crossed the room and turned her chair to face him. Because what else, Claire? Say it. And she felt tears starting. Because you're a good man and you deserve to not feel like you're failing. And because I care about you way more than I should. His hands framed her face gently. I'm in love with you. I think I have been since that first day when you said yes to a job offer from a stranger. And I know it's complicated, but I don't care anymore. Claire pulled back like she'd been burned. We can't. Your mother-in-law hates me. The whole town thinks I'm using you. I'm your employee. And Nate, I lost my parents and it destroyed me. What if I let myself love you and lose you too? He didn't let her go. What if you don't lose me? What if we get years? What if we're allowed to be happy? They were inches apart and Claire could feel herself giving in when Ava's little voice called from the reading nook. Daddy, I had a scary dream. And the moment shattered into 1,000 pieces. Claire grabbed her coat and practically ran for the door. I need time to think. This is too much too fast. And she left Nate standing there with his heart on his sleeve and no idea what happened next. The next morning, Margaret Chen showed up at Claire's apartment, holding a worn leather journal. And the look on her face was something Claire couldn't read, somewhere between apology and determination, and she said 5 words that changed everything. We need to talk about Rachel. Margaret Chen stood in the doorway of Claire's tiny apartment at 8 in the morning, holding a worn leather journal like it weighed 1,000 pounds. And the look on her face was something Claire had never seen before. Raw and vulnerable, and maybe a little bit broken. We need to talk about Rachel, and her voice cracked on her daughter's name. And Claire stepped back to let her in, even though every instinct said this conversation was going to wreck her completely. They sat at Claire's thrift store kitchen table, and Margaret slid the journal across like she was handing over something sacred. I found this in storage yesterday, Rachel's journal from when she was pregnant. There's an entry from 1 week before she died that I think you need to read. Claire's hands shook, opening to the page Margaret had marked with a faded ribbon, and Rachel's handwriting was loopy and hopeful, in a way that made Claire's throat close up. If something happens during delivery, I need Nate to know he has to find someone who loves our girls. Not someone who tries to replace me, but someone who sees them as people, not as my ghost. I want him happy. I want him to fall in love again. The girls need to see what love looks like, not what grief looks like forever. Tell him I said it's okay to let go. Claire was crying before she finished reading, and Margaret was crying too. Years of holding on to her daughter so tight she'd been suffocating what Rachel actually wanted. I was wrong about you. Margaret's voice was thick with emotion. I was protecting the wrong thing, holding on to Rachel so hard I couldn't see that you're exactly what she would have wanted for them. Claire wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm not trying to replace her. I could never. She gave Nate those beautiful girls and this dream, and I'm just... But Margaret cut her off. You're not just anything. I've watched you with Ava and Mia. You ask them what they want. You let them be sad when they need to be. You don't project my daughter onto them. And Claire, that's exactly what Rachel was afraid wouldn't happen. She was terrified Nate would find someone who tried to be her instead of being themselves. Margaret left an hour later after hugging Claire so tight it hurt. And the second the door closed, Claire grabbed her phone and called Jordan. I need you and Sophie to cover for me today. I have something I need to do. And her brother's voice came through, careful and knowing. You're going to tell him you love him, aren't you? And Claire laughed through leftover tears. Yeah, I think I am. She drove to Once Upon a Page at 9:30 and found Nate in the office doing inventory, badly because she'd taught him the system, but he still struggled, and when he looked up and saw her face, he stood so fast his chair rolled backward. Margaret came to see me this morning. She showed me Rachel's journal, and Claire's voice was steadier than she expected, and Nate went pale. Oh God, what did it say, Claire? I'm sorry if she... But Claire crossed the room and kissed him before he could finish spiraling. She pulled back just enough to talk. It said Rachel wanted you to fall in love again, wanted the girls to see what love looks like instead of endless grief, said she was giving you permission to let go and be happy. Nate's hands came up to cup her face. And what do you want? Because I've laid it all out there, and I need to know where you stand. Claire took a shaky breath. I'm still terrified of losing you, but I'm more terrified of not trying, of looking back in 10 years and regretting that I was too scared to love you. Nate kissed her then, deep and sure and full of 3 months of wanting, and when they finally broke apart, he was grinning. So we're doing this, for real, you and me? Claire nodded. Me and you and 4 kids and a bookshop and whatever chaos comes next? Yeah, we're doing this. 3 months later in April, the bookshop was completely transformed, revenue up 40% and debt cut in half. And Claire had finished her final semester online with Nate paying the tuition as a bonus that made her cry. Jordan and Sophie were working part-time earning college money. Ava and Mia had started calling Claire Miss Claire Bear, which was a name they'd invented themselves. And Nate had finally taken off the wedding ring he'd been wearing on a chain and put it in a memory box with Rachel's things. He took Claire back to Riverside Café on a warm spring evening, got them a table in the corner, and the new owner who'd bought the place from Derek came over to personally thank Claire for all the business she'd been sending their way. 6 months ago, I watched you get fired right here, and I almost didn't say anything, almost let you walk away. And Nate pulled out a ring box. New ring, not Rachel's, because this was Claire's moment, and got down on one knee right there where he'd first stood up for her. Claire Bennett, you saved my business and my daughters and me. You took a disaster of a bookshop and turned it into something Rachel would be proud of. Will you marry us? Will you let us be your family officially? Claire was nodding before he finished. Yes, God, yes, I love you so much it's ridiculous. And the entire restaurant erupted just like the cafe had 6 months ago. Their 4 kids crashed the proposal because they'd been hiding with Vanessa in a booth across the restaurant. And the group hug that followed made other diners pull out their phones to record it. 2 weeks later, Jordan and Sophie sat Claire and Nate down looking nervous. We can't let you pay for our college. It's too much. And we don't want to be in the way now that you're getting married. But Nate shook his head firmly. You're not in the way. You're family. And I'm paying for college for both of you, full ride, because that's what family does. Your sister raised you when she should have been finishing her own degree. Let me do this. They got married in September in the bookshop, surrounded by every book that had ever mattered to either of them, and Jordan and Sophie walked Claire down the aisle together, while Ava and Mia served as the most serious flower girls in history, throwing petals with scientific precision. Margaret sat in the front row holding a framed photo of Rachel. She's here too. She'd be so happy. and Claire had to stop halfway down the aisle to compose herself. Nate's vows destroyed everyone. You taught my daughters that love grows, and new people don't erase old ones. Rachel gave me Ava and Mia. You gave me hope again. Thank you for being brave enough to stand with me. Claire's voice shook, reading hers. You stood up for me when I had nothing and gave me everything. You taught me it's okay to build a new family while honoring the one I lost. I love you and our 4 kids and this beautiful, chaotic life we're building. Ava gave a speech that Nate had helped her memorize, her little voice carrying through the bookshop. My first mama's in heaven watching. My forever mama's here with me. I'm so lucky I get both of them. And there wasn't a dry eye anywhere in the room. 1 year later, Claire stood behind the counter of their now expanded bookshop that had bought the neighboring space. Once Upon a Page had become a town landmark, and she was managing full-time while also teaching business classes at the community college. Jordan was thriving at UNC Chapel Hill, and Sophie was killing it at NC State. Ava and Mia had just started kindergarten, and Claire's hand rested on the small bump just starting to show under her shirt. Nate came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. Spotted the bump immediately because of course he did. Think we can handle 5 kids? He whispered against her hair, and Claire laughed. We're already handling 4 in a bookshop and my college classes. What's one more? Christmas Eve came around again, exactly 1 year since the firing, and they hosted a community event at the bookshop with free hot chocolate and story time. Derek walked in looking uncomfortable, approached Claire carefully. I heard this place was doing great. I wanted to say I'm sorry for how I fired you. You didn't deserve that. And Claire smiled genuinely. I forgive you, and you're welcome here anytime. Seriously. After he left, Nate raised an eyebrow. You're nicer than me? I would have told him to kick rocks. And Claire gestured around at the bookshop full of families. Their 4 kids playing in the reading nook, Margaret reading to a group of toddlers in the corner. He did me a favor, honestly. If he hadn't fired me, I wouldn't have any of this. And she kissed Nate under the mistletoe their twins had hung everywhere. Sometimes getting fired is the universe saying, you're meant for something better. Claire thought losing her job on Christmas Eve was rock bottom, but it was actually the foundation for everything beautiful that came after. If you've ever been publicly humiliated or lost everything right before the holidays, this story's for you, because sometimes the worst days become the best stories. And the single dad who stood up didn't just offer a job, he offered a future. Hit subscribe if this reminded you that standing up for what's right might change 2 lives forever. Thanks for being here with us.